I held the keys in my hand as I stood before my new home. I had bought it at an unbelievable price. Too good to be true, the real estate agent warned with a nervous laugh that didn't reach his eyes. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a spacious kitchen, and a beautiful yard with tall oak trees that cast long shadows across the lawn like grasping fingers. I noticed the neighbors watching from behind curtains as I moved my boxes inside, their faces tense and unreadable as I struggled with my belongings, determined to make this house my sanctuary after a messy divorce that had left me emotionally drained and financially desperate. The real estate agent, Mr. Collins, had been oddly eager to close the deal, slashing the asking price twice when I hesitated. Now, standing on the porch with the papers signed and the keys in my hand, he wouldn't meet my eyes. The previous owners left rather suddenly, he explained, studying his shoes. Family emergency. They took very little with them, so you'll find some furniture and items still inside. Consider it a bonus. Before I could ask any questions, he was hurrying to his car, calling over his shoulder about contacting his office if I needed anything. The first night passed uneasily, strange creaks and settling noises keeping me on edge despite my exhaustion from moving. The house seemed to breathe around me, expanding and contracting with sounds that weren't quite normal for an old building. The previous owner's abandoned possessions made everything worse. Family photos still hanging on walls, clothes still in some of the closets, food items in the pantry. It felt like they had fled in the middle of dinner. I spent that night huddled in my sleeping bag, unwilling to use their beds. I spent the next day unpacking, arranging furniture, and making the space truly mine with family photos and personal items that reminded me of happier times. I removed the previous owner's photos, stacking them carefully in a box in the basement to deal with later. Each smiling face seemed to watch me accusingly as I took them down. By evening, I was dead tired and fell into a restless sleep in my new bedroom, tossing and turning as unfamiliar sounds echoed through the walls. Scratching, tapping, and the distinct sound of footsteps in rooms I knew were empty. Morning light streamed through my curtains when I awoke, stretching with relief that night was over before heading to the bathroom. I stopped short in the hallway, blinking in confusion at a door that hadn't been there yesterday. A dark wooden door with an antique brass knob, positioned between my bedroom and the bathroom, where only blank wall had been. The wood looked ancient, the grain twisted into patterns that seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at them. "That's impossible," I said aloud, my voice echoing strangely in the hallway as I reached for the handle and found it locked tight, the metal cold against my palm despite the warmth of the morning. I tried to convince myself I was mistaken, that the door had always been there and I'd simply failed to notice it yesterday in the chaos of moving. But I knew that wasn't true. I had walked this hallway dozens of times. There was no door, and now there was. Simple as that. And impossible all the same. I called my realtor immediately, trying to keep the panic from my voice as I described the door. He insisted there were only 5 doors on the upper floor according to the house plans, his tone suggesting I might be confused or making things up. When I pressed him, asking if there had been renovations or sealed rooms not in the plans, his voice became strangely formal. "The house is exactly as listed in the disclosure documents you signed. Perhaps you should get more rest. Moving is stressful." He hung up before I could respond. I spent the rest of the day trying to open the mysterious door, but no amount of pushing, pulling, or tool use would budge it. I tried a credit card in the jamb, then a screwdriver on the hinges that seemed fused to the wood, and finally a hammer that bounced off the surface without leaving a mark. The door absorbed the blows as if made of rubber, the wood flexing slightly before returning to shape. Eventually, I gave up and continued unpacking, but couldn't shake the feeling of being watched whenever I turned my back to the door. Like someone was standing just on the other side, I pressed to the keyhole, tracking my every movement. That evening, I met my next-door neighbor, an elderly woman named Mrs. Keswick, who brought over a casserole to welcome you properly. As we sat in my kitchen, I casually asked if she knew the previous owners well. Her face changed, smile fading. The Harrises? Nice young couple. Kept to themselves mostly. Had a beautiful little girl, Emma. She looked down at her tea. Tragic what happened. What did happen? I asked, trying to sound merely curious. Mrs. Keswick's eyes darted around the room as if checking who might be listening. They said Emma was sleepwalking, wandered out one night and got lost in the woods behind the property. They searched for weeks. She leaned forward, lowering her voice. They never found her, not a trace. Mr. Harris swore the house took her, that a door appeared, and she stopped abruptly, shaking her head. Listen to me, gossiping like this. It was a tragic accident, nothing more. She left shortly after, making excuses about medication and early bedtimes. But at the door, she gripped my arm with surprising strength. If you notice anything strange about this house, anything at all, don't investigate. Leave. Just leave. Before I could respond, she was gone, hurrying back to her own home without looking back. The next morning, the door was gone. I ran my hand over the wall where it had been, finding only smooth plaster without a trace of the previous day's anomaly. No seams, no outline, not even a mark where the hinges had been. Cold sweat broke out on my forehead as I wondered if I was losing my mind, if the stress of the move and divorce had finally broken something inside me. I took photos of the empty wall with my phone, needing evidence that at least this current reality was solid and unchanging. I spent that day researching the house's history at the local library, discovering it had been built in 1897 by a merchant named Jeremiah Stone, who made his fortune importing exotic goods from the Far East. The librarian, a middle-aged man with thick glasses, smiled when I mentioned the address. That house has quite a reputation, he said, pulling out old newspaper clippings from a file. Jeremiah Stone was rumored to be involved in more than just legitimate trade. Some said he brought back occult objects, that he conducted experiments in altering the physical properties of spaces. The clippings told a disturbing story. Stone's wife and 3 children disappeared one night in 1901. Stone claimed they had gone to visit relatives, but no relatives ever acknowledged receiving them. Stone himself was found dead in the house a year later, his body discovered in a room that, according to the investigating officer's baffled report, seemed to have no entrance or exit, yet existed within the confines of the house. Since then, the house had changed hands dozens of times, with no family staying longer than a few years. There were 3 other reported disappearances connected to the property, all children, all unsolved. The most recent was Emma Harris, just 6 months ago. That night, while heading to the kitchen for a late snack, I froze at the bottom of the stairs. There in the living room wall was the same dark wooden door with its brass knob, now where my TV had been just hours before. The television was simply gone, as if it had never existed, replaced by the door that fit perfectly into the wall. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees as I approached it slowly, my breath visible in the suddenly cold air, telling myself this couldn't be happening while knowing with absolute certainty that it was. This time, when I touched the knob, it turned easily under my hand, the mechanism clicking softly as it released. The door swung open on silent hinges to reveal a small room with peeling wallpaper and a single window, showing a night sky with stars arranged in patterns that made no sense. Constellations that couldn't exist on Earth. Formations that hurt my eyes if I looked at them too long. A rocking chair sat in the corner, moving back and forth with no one in it, its wooden legs scraping rhythmically against the floor in perfect time, like the ticking of a clock counting down to something terrible. Something about the room pulled at me, a strange gravity that made me take one step forward before I caught myself. The air inside the room looked different, thicker somehow, moving in slow currents like water. On the far wall was a child's drawing done in what looked like red crayon, a crude house with 4 stick figures, 3 large and 1 small, all with exaggerated smiles that stretched beyond the boundaries of their circular heads. I slammed the door shut and ran back upstairs, locking myself in my bedroom until morning light filtered through my windows, illuminating dust motes that danced in patterns too orderly to be random. When I finally gathered the courage to check, the living room was normal again, my TV back in place with no sign of any door, showing the morning news as if nothing had happened. My friend suggested over the phone that maybe the house was settling or I was sleepwalking, but her voice sounded doubtful, concerned. "Old houses do strange things," she said, not believing her own words. "Maybe you should get your carbon monoxide detector checked." But I knew this was something else. Something worse than gas-induced hallucinations. That day, I installed carbon monoxide detectors anyway, along with cameras in every room, determined to document whatever was happening. I called a local contractor about the house's construction, asking if there could be hidden rooms or sealed spaces not on the official plans. He agreed to come look, but couldn't make it for 3 days. Until then, I was on my own. 3 days passed without incident, and I began to hope it had been stress hallucinations, my mind playing tricks after all the trauma of the past year. The contractor's inspection found nothing unusual, no hidden spaces, no sealed rooms, no structural anomalies that could explain what I'd seen. "Solid house," he assured me, "built to last." I hosted a small housewarming gathering with 2 friends who seemed uncomfortable the entire time, claiming the house felt off, but couldn't explain why. They kept looking over their shoulders, conversations falling into awkward silences whenever we heard the house creak. They left earlier than planned, making excuses about work in the morning, leaving me alone again with my thoughts and fears in a house that felt increasingly alien. That night, after my friends left, I went to my kitchen to clean up the dishes and stopped mid-step. The wooden door now stood where my pantry should be, its brass knob gleaming in the kitchen light despite there being no source to reflect. The security camera I'd installed in the corner of the kitchen showed nothing but static on my phone's screen. I stood staring at the door for nearly 10 minutes, debating whether to open it or run from the house, screaming. The dishes in my hand slipped, shattering on the floor, but I barely registered the sound over the pounding of my heart. Curiosity and a strange compulsion won out, a pull I couldn't resist even as my mind screamed warnings. I opened the door slowly, finding the same room but with disturbing differences. The rocking chair now faced away from the window, and a small table held a cup of dark liquid that steamed as if freshly poured, smelling of earth and copper. The window showed a red sky I'd never seen in nature, cloudless and wrong, with a sun that was too large and too dark, like an infected wound in the crimson sky. On the far wall, where there had been the child's drawing before, was now a second door, identical to the first. The room felt colder than the kitchen behind me, the air stale and heavy with an unpleasant smell I couldn't identify. Not decay exactly, but something ancient and unwholesome. I took one hesitant step inside, driven by a need to understand what I was dealing with. The floor beneath my feet didn't feel solid. It gave slightly, like walking on flesh rather than wood. I recoiled, but before I could step back into the kitchen, the door behind me slammed shut, with enough force to rattle the cup on the small table, dark liquid sloshing over the rim. Panic surged through me as I spun around, grabbing for the knob that was no longer there. The door had sealed seamlessly into the wall. My fists pounded against the wood, screaming for help that couldn't hear me. Minutes passed like hours, until I finally turned to face the second door, the one that had appeared on the far wall. It was my only way out now. My steps were unsteady as I crossed the small room, the floor continuing to shift unnaturally beneath me. The rocking chair's movement had accelerated, the tempo increasing with each passing second. When I reached for the knob on the second door, it felt warm to the touch, almost fevered. It turned easily, the door swinging open to reveal not another room but my own kitchen, exactly as I'd left it moments before. Broken dishes still scattered across the floor. Relief flooded through me as I stepped through, only to freeze as I realized the kitchen was a perfect mirror image of mine. Everything reversed, like looking at a reflection. The thing that confirmed this wasn't my kitchen was the calendar on the wall displaying a month that didn't exist, with 32 days and a name I couldn't read or pronounce. I backed away from this wrongness, bumping into the door that had closed behind me, only to find it had disappeared again, leaving me trapped in this inverted version of my home. A sound from upstairs made me look up. Footsteps, heavy and dragging, moving across the ceiling. Something was up there, pacing the hallway outside the bedrooms. Something heavy. I stood frozen, afraid to make a noise, as the footsteps stopped directly above me. Dust drifted down from the ceiling as whatever it was seemed to crouch, the floorboards creaking under its weight. Then silence, stretching for so long I almost convinced myself I'd imagined the whole thing, until a thud shook the ceiling, followed by another and another, moving in sequence toward the stairs. It was coming down. I ran for the front door, yanking it open only to find a solid brick wall where my porch should be. The windows showed more brick instead of the front yard. I was sealed in. The house had become a tomb. The footsteps reached the bottom of the stairs as I backed into the living room, looking frantically for a weapon, an escape, anything. What came around the corner wasn't human. It had the basic shape: 2 arms, 2 legs, a torso and head. But everything was wrong. Its limbs were too long, joints bending in too many places. Its face was smooth and featureless, except for a wide slash of a mouth that stretched from ear to ear. It moved in jerky stops and starts, like something learning how to operate its body. When it saw me, that massive mouth split into a grin that revealed rows of teeth like needles. "Found you," it said in a voice like grinding stone. "New guest, new player." I ran, though there was nowhere to go, heading for the back of the house as the thing followed at a leisurely pace, confident in the knowledge that I was trapped. In the kitchen again, I grabbed a knife, holding it out before me as the creature appeared in the doorway. "Little knife, little threat," it mocked, the words coming from that horrific mouth without its lips moving. "The door brought you. The door will take you, just like the others." "What others?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice from shaking. The thing's head tilted at an impossible angle. The missing ones, the forgotten ones, the ones in the walls. It gestured lazily at the kitchen walls, and for the first time I noticed the subtle outlines in the wallpaper. Hands, faces, bodies pressed against the surface from the inside, as if frozen mid-struggle while trying to escape. I screamed then, a sound of pure terror that seemed to delight the creature. It took a step toward me just as the dark wooden door reappeared, materializing directly between us. Without thinking, I yanked it open and threw myself through, not caring where it led as long as it was away from that monstrosity. I landed hard on my own kitchen floor, the real one this time, the broken dishes cutting into my palms as I scrambled to my feet. The door remained open behind me, and through it I could see the creature howling in rage, reaching for the opening but unable to pass through. As I watched in horror and relief, the door slowly began to close on its own, the creature's cries fading as the gap narrowed to nothing. When the door sealed completely, it shimmered and vanished, leaving only my pantry in its place. I closed the door quickly and went to bed, pulling the covers over my head like a child. I didn't sleep, staring instead at my bedroom door, expecting any moment to see the knob turn. In the morning, my pantry was back, all traces of the mysterious room gone once again. The broken dishes remained on the floor, proving at least that part of the night had been real. My hands were bandaged where I'd cut them on the broken glass, injuries I didn't remember treating. Had I sleepwalked again, or had something else tended my wounds while I slept? I began keeping a journal of the door's appearances, trying to find a pattern while searching online for anyone who'd experienced something similar. I found nothing but creepypasta stories and urban legends, nothing that matched the specific terror of my wandering door and the wrongness behind it. But in my research, I came across references to thin places in Celtic mythology, locations where the barrier between worlds was weaker, allowing passage between realms. Other cultures had similar concepts. The Japanese had hidden gaps. Native Americans spoke of spirit doorways, and quantum physicists theorized about wormholes connecting distant points in space-time. Was my house built on such a place? Or had Jeremiah Stone somehow created it with his experiments a century ago? Whatever the case, I was dealing with something beyond normal understanding, something that had taken children and possibly many others over the decades. The door appeared in different places every few nights, sometimes in unexpected locations like walls or replacing existing doors. Other times in impossible spots like the middle of my dining table or halfway up the staircase, defying physics and sanity alike. Each time I looked inside, the room was the same, but increasingly wrong. The wallpaper peeling to reveal writing underneath in a language I couldn't read but somehow understood, conveyed terrible things. The rocking chair positioned to face me directly as if someone had just vacated it upon my arrival. The window showing impossible scenes like cities burning or oceans boiling or worse, familiar streets from my childhood that couldn't possibly be visible from this house. One appearance revealed children's toys scattered across the floor of the room. A teddy bear missing an eye, wooden blocks with strange symbols instead of letters, a doll with a cracked porcelain face that turned to watch me when I wasn't looking directly at it. Another time, the room contained hundreds of photographs pinned to the walls, all showing the same image, a dark, hooded figure standing at the foot of my bed while I slept, unaware. The timestamps on the photos showed they'd been taken over several weeks, including nights when the door hadn't appeared, or at least when I hadn't seen it appear. After 2 weeks, I tried to sell the house, but the realtor who had been so eager to sell it to me wouldn't return my calls, his voicemail becoming full after 3 days of my increasingly desperate messages. Other agencies claimed they couldn't list the property due to zoning issues or paperwork problems that they couldn't quite specify. One agent actually came to the house but left abruptly during the tour when we entered the kitchen, her face pale as she made excuses and practically ran to her car. I was trapped here with the wandering door and whatever waited behind it, my savings depleted from the purchase, my job barely covering the mortgage. I considered burning the house down, an intrusive thought that grew stronger each day, but something told me that wouldn't solve the problem. The door wasn't part of the house. It was part of something using the house as an anchor in our world. Destroying the structure might only make things worse, removing what little protection the normal walls provided against the wrongness behind that dark wood. One evening, as I sat in my office trying to work, I noticed a shadow sliding under my closet door, a darkness deeper than the normal absence of light. Opening it with shaking hands, I found the door had replaced the back wall of my closet, my hanging clothes pushed aside as if by unseen hands to make room for the now familiar dark wood. This time when I opened it, the room was dark except for a single candle on the table, its flame burning blue and still, casting unnatural shadows that moved independent of any light source. Next to the candle was a handwritten note in childish scrawl that made my stomach drop. "I've been watching you sleep. You look so peaceful when your eyes are closed." The handwriting matched the samples I'd found in a box in the basement. Emma Harris's schoolwork, left behind in her parents' hasty departure. But the implication was impossible. Emma had disappeared months before I moved in, unless time worked differently on the other side of the door, or unless whatever took her was now pretending to be her, using her handwriting to lure me deeper into its trap. My hand shook as I picked up the note, realizing with horror that something was in my home, something that could move through walls and watch me when I was most vulnerable. I backed away, slamming both doors shut before running to my car. I drove to a hotel and stayed there for 3 days, calling in sick to work, barely eating, jumping at every sound in the hallway or neighboring rooms. The hotel began to feel unsafe too after the second night, when I woke to find my room door ajar, despite the deadbolt and security chain I'd engaged before sleeping. When I returned home, reluctantly, and only because I couldn't afford to stay away longer, the house seemed normal. Everything was exactly as I'd left it, not a single item out of place, which was wrong in itself. No dust had settled, no mail had accumulated, the dirty coffee mug I'd left on the counter was still warm to the touch. It was as if time had paused in my absence, or as if something had carefully maintained the illusion of normalcy, knowing I would return. No door appeared that night, or the next. Just as I started to relax, thinking perhaps whatever haunted me had given up or moved on, I found scratches on the inside of my bedroom door, 3 long parallel lines that hadn't been there when I left, too high for a pet I didn't own, too precise to be accidental damage. Running my fingers over them, I found they were deep and fresh, the exposed wood still rough and splintered. Below them, carved in small, neat letters, "Welcome home." That night, I pretended to sleep while keeping watch, a kitchen knife under my pillow and my phone set to record anything that might happen. Around 3 a.m., I heard a sound like wood splintering. Sitting up, I saw the wooden door forming in the middle of my bedroom floor, pushing up through the carpet like it was growing from below, the floorboards bending and warping impossibly to create the frame. I couldn't scream, couldn't move as the knob turned slowly from the other side, the brass rotating degree by degree with a deliberate patience that spoke of terrible anticipation. The door opened upward like a trap door, and a pale hand with too many joints gripped the edge, the fingers unnaturally long and boneless, the skin mottled with patches of gray and green like advanced decay. I finally found my voice and screamed, throwing my bedside lamp at the hand. The bulb shattered on impact, throwing the room into darkness as the door slammed shut and sank back into the floor, leaving only torn carpet as evidence it had been there at all. My phone's recording showed nothing but static and digital artifacts. the audio a mess of electronic noise and just barely audible beneath the distortion what sounded like a child's laughter. I didn't sleep again that night or the next. I installed cameras throughout the house, spending money I didn't have on a security system that linked to my phone, hoping to catch evidence of what was happening. The footage showed nothing unusual until the third night, when all cameras simultaneously lost signal for exactly 7 minutes. When they came back online, something had changed in every room. Small objects moved, chairs turned around, all my framed photos now facing the walls. In the bathroom mirror, written in what looked like condensation but wouldn't wipe away, were the words, "Open the second door." I didn't understand what it meant until the next appearance of the door, this time replacing my back door. When I reluctantly looked inside the room, I saw that the second door I'd encountered during my first full entry into the room was back, installed in the far wall. The message was clear. Whatever entity controlled this phenomenon wanted me to go deeper, to open that second door again and step through to whatever lay beyond the inverted version of my house. But why? What could it possibly want from me? The local library yielded more information about the house's history as I dug deeper into newspaper archives. The disappearances connected to the property weren't limited to children. At least 7 adults had gone missing as well, though these cases had received less attention. Most were dismissed as people abandoning their lives, running from debts or responsibilities. But the pattern was there if you knew to look for it. More disturbing was what I found about Jeremiah Stone. Before his family's disappearance, he had written several monographs on theoretical physics that had been dismissed by the scientific community as the ravings of a madman. His central thesis was that physical space was not fixed but malleable, that rooms could exist in multiple locations simultaneously, and that doors could serve as connectors between planes of existence never meant to touch. He claimed to have constructed a prototype, a door that could appear anywhere within his house and lead to a waiting room between realities. A week later, exhausted and desperate, I found a local paranormal researcher online who agreed to visit. She walked through the house with various instruments, stopping frequently to take readings and make notes, her face growing more concerned by the minute. "This place has a thin spot," she finally said, showing me a device whose needle swung wildly in certain areas of the house. "A weakness between our world and somewhere else. That door you're seeing, it's not part of your house, it's part of something trying to get in, or get out. The barrier between realities is damaged here." She explained that certain locations develop these weaknesses naturally over time, but others can be created artificially. Your Jeremiah Stone succeeded in his experiments. He created a permanent passage, but I don't think he understood what he was connecting to. Her instruments detected what she called temporal anomalies throughout the house, pockets where time moved differently, explaining how the door could appear and disappear so completely. "It's not just coming and going," she explained. "It's moving through different times, different versions of this house. When it's not here in our present, it's in the past or future, or some alternate track altogether." She left me with protective charms and strict instructions never to open the door again, no matter where it appeared or what I saw beyond it. "It's learning," she warned. "Each time you interact with it, it understands our world better. It's looking for a way to stay permanently, to break through completely." After she left, I placed her charms around the house. Small bundles of herbs and symbols drawn in blessed oil on door frames and windowsills. They made me feel slightly better, though I doubted their efficacy against something that could warp physical space and manipulate time. That night, While checking the back door was locked before bed, I noticed the charms the researcher had placed were gone. Not fallen or moved, but completely absent, as if they'd never been there at all. When I texted her about it, her reply was immediate and chilling. "Get out now. Don't pack. Just go." I was halfway to the front door when the house went dark, every light extinguishing simultaneously. The front door, when I reached it, wouldn't open. The knob turned, but the door itself seemed fused to the frame. The windows, when I tried them, showed not the street outside, but solid brick walls, just like in the mirror universe I'd glimpsed. I was sealed in, trapped by whatever force controlled the wandering door. In the darkness, I heard it, the sound of wood taking shape, the distinctive creak of hinges that needed oil. The door was forming again, somewhere in the house. I fumbled for my phone, using its flashlight to navigate through the suddenly unfamiliar space of my home. The layout seemed wrong, hallways longer than they should be, rooms connecting in ways that defied the house's actual floor plan. I found the door in the living room, but this time it was different. Larger, grander, carved with symbols that matched those in Jeremiah Stone's monographs. It stood alone in the center of the room, connected to no wall, a freestanding portal that radiated a palpable wrongness. Around its frame, the air rippled like heat waves, and through those ripples I could glimpse other places. My kitchen, my bedroom, the basement, but also places I didn't recognize. A forest with trees too straight and regular to be natural. A city of impossible geometry under a sky with 3 moons. A vast library where the books bled actual blood from their spines. The door swung open without being touched, revealing the now familiar room beyond. But the room had changed too. The rocking chair was occupied now. A small figure sitting motionless in the gloom. A child, her back to me, long dark hair cascading over a white nightgown. When she spoke, her voice was sweet and innocent and terribly wrong. "Will you play with me?" Everyone else stopped playing. They're all in the walls now. The girl turned, slowly, revealing a face that was almost but not quite human. The eyes too large, the smile too wide, the teeth too numerous and sharp. "I'm lonely," said the thing that wasn't Emma Harris. "I need a new friend, someone to stay forever." I backed away as she stood, her movements jerky and wrong, the nightgown revealing glimpses of skin that shifted and flowed like liquid, rather than remaining solid. "The door brought you to me," she said, voice distorting, deepening, just like it brought all the others. Jeremiah's door. My door now. It stepped through the doorway into my living room, its form growing larger, shifting between child and adult and something else entirely, something with too many limbs that bent at impossible angles. "Your house has always been my house," it said, the voice now a chorus of dozens, speaking in unison. "Your world will be my world soon." I ran, though there was nowhere to go, heading upstairs as the thing pursued at a leisurely pace, confident in its control of the environment. In my bedroom, I slammed the door and wedged a chair under the handle, knowing it was futile. The window showed the same brick wall as downstairs. No escape there. As I cast about desperately for a weapon, anything to defend myself, I noticed my closet door shimmering slightly, the wood grain flowing like water. Without thinking, driven by blind instinct and terror, I yanked it open. Beyond was not my closet but the room again, the same room that appeared behind every manifestation of the wandering door. But this version was different. Older, dustier, as if long abandoned. The rocking chair was broken, collapsed in the corner. The table held not a teacup, but an ancient leather-bound book, its pages open to diagrams matching the symbols on the grand door downstairs. I stepped through just as my bedroom door splintered, the chair flying across the room as the entity broke through. The closet door slammed shut behind me, sealing me in the room that existed somehow between worlds, between times. The book on the table was Jeremiah Stone's journal, his private notes on the experiment that had doomed his family and so many others after them. The journal described how Stone had discovered that certain geometries could bend space, that specific woods harvested from trees growing at points of natural weakness between worlds could be used to construct doorways. He had built such a door and installed it in his home, intending it as a scientific triumph. What he hadn't understood was that doors work both ways. Something had noticed his experiment, something that had been looking for a way into our world for a very long time. It had taken his family first, then Stone himself, using them to learn about humanity, to prepare for a larger incursion. The final pages of the journal, written in an increasingly frantic hand, detailed Stone's last effort to contain what he had unleashed. He couldn't destroy the door. It existed partially outside normal space-time, but he could bind it, limit its power, keep it trapped in a loop between moments, appearing and disappearing, never stable enough to serve as a permanent gateway. The ritual had required a sacrifice, himself. His blood had sealed the binding, forcing the entity to work slowly, taking victims one by one over decades rather than flooding through in a single catastrophic invasion. As I read, I understood that the binding was failing. Each interaction with the door, each time someone entered the room or acknowledged the door's existence, the entity's power grew. My arrival, my repeated encounters with it, had accelerated the process. The disappearances over the years weren't random. They were the entity testing its limitations, measuring the strength of Stone's binding spell, learning the rules of our reality. A pounding on the door startled me from my reading. The entity had found me, tracked me to this version of the room. "You can't hide in my own domain," it called, voice shifting between child and adult and something utterly inhuman. "All doors lead to me now." The door bulged inward with each impact, the wood straining against forces no material should be able to withstand. I turned back to the journal, desperately skimming for anything that might help me. The last page contained a second ritual, not to bind the entity, but to reset the binding, to renew Stone's original spell. It required the same ingredients, blood freely given at the threshold of the door, symbols drawn on the frame, words spoken in a language that hurt my eyes to read. The door cracked, a long split appearing in the ancient wood. Through it, I glimpsed something that defied description, a mass of shapes and colors that shouldn't exist together, moving in patterns that made my mind recoil. I had seconds at most before it broke through completely. With shaking hands, I tore the page from the journal and pressed it against the door frame. Using my house key, I cut my palm and smeared blood along the wood, tracing the symbols from Stone's diagram. The entity howled, the sound coming from everywhere at once. From behind the breaking door, from the walls, from the air itself. As I spoke the words from the ritual, each syllable burning my throat like swallowing glass, the room began to change around me. The walls rippled, the ceiling stretched upward into darkness. The floor became transparent, revealing an endless void below. Through it all, I continued the ritual, my blood soaking into the wood of the doorframe as I recited words in a language no human throat was designed to speak. The door before me, the one the entity was breaking through, began to shrink, compressing inward as if being crushed by invisible hands. With a final, reality-tearing shriek, the door imploded, collapsing into a single point of darkness that hung in the air for a moment before winking out of existence. The pressure in the room normalized, the walls stopped rippling, and the floor became solid again. I collapsed, exhausted and bleeding, unsure if the ritual had worked or if I had only managed to anger the entity further. I woke sometime later on the floor of a normal closet, my closet filled with my clothes, in my bedroom. Daylight streamed through the windows, showing the normal view of the street outside, no brick walls in sight. My hand was crudely bandaged, though I had no memory of doing it myself. The torn page from Stone's journal was gone. For a week, I waited in dread for the door to reappear. I didn't sleep more than minutes at a time, kept all lights on, and jumped at every creak and groan of the house settling. But the door didn't return. The security cameras showed nothing unusual. Slowly, cautiously, I began to hope the nightmare was over. Then I found the note, slipped under my front door like ordinary mail. In childish handwriting it read, "The game isn't over, just paused. I'll find another door. I'll find another house. I'll find another you." I sold the house the next day, taking a devastating financial loss but not caring. The new owners, a young family with 2 small children, were delighted by the bargain price. I tried to warn them, but how could I explain? Who would believe such a story? I live in an apartment now in another state. No doors that shouldn't exist, no rooms that defy physics. But sometimes when I'm falling asleep, I hear the distinctive creak of a rocking chair from somewhere inside my walls. And last week I noticed something that made my body go cold. A thin line appearing on my bedroom ceiling, the outline of a door that wasn't there before. It found me. The binding didn't work. Or perhaps it did, but only temporarily. The wandering door is coming back, and this time I don't think I can escape.